Hey guys, I'm Aaron from Finctum Languages, and I'm here today to talk to you about a topic that has been discussed a lot on this channel and a lot in other language learning communities. But it's something that people think about a lot and something that people don't always understand entirely, especially people who have never tried learning a language before. And that is, what is fluency? This is a word that we throw around all the time, and it's not entirely clear everyone uses this word to mean the same thing. When we talk about being fluent in Spanish or English, or being fluent in your target language, being fluent in the uh, necessary attributes that you have to have in order to be considered fluent. And before we get into that, I always want to start off just by talking a little bit to my viewers. For those of you who are watching right now, where are you from? What time zone are you in? Right now, it's 10 o'clock in the morning for me here in Wisconsin. Normally, I do it a little bit later, but I'm currently babysitting my brother's dog. So we're doing a slightly earlier live stream. So anyways, where are you from? What language do you speak as your native language? And excuse me, I'm grabbing my tea here. And what language are you learning? I'm always interested in hearing from you guys before we even get started doing the live stream discussion. And of course, as we're going through, if you have questions or comments or anything that you need to add, that's what these live streams are for. It's for me to be able to interact with you. So anyways, on to the subject. What is fluency? Lucas Santos says, fluency is more like a spectrum. And I think that's exactly right. It's really hard to define what fluency is. It's just like the thumbnail of this video that I put up. Before you clicked on the video, you probably saw the little thumbnail. I put up this little gradient, and I would put it up on the screen now if I understood how to do computer tech things like that. But anyways, it's a gradient. It looks kind of like that, right? Here we have a green and a yellow, and then they sort of flow into each other. And we can tell for sure that this down here is green, right? And this up here is yellow. Actually, that one isn't even really a great example, right? We know that this in this corner down here is yellow. This one up here in the other corner is green. And to me, that's kind of like fluency. It's kind of like not being able to speak Spanish. And this green over here is being able to speak Spanish. When does one become the other? It's not clear, right? There's no definite line between not speaking Spanish and being able to speak Spanish, where you just realize you've arrived. We know that one is green and one corner is yellow, but it's a mess in between. And that's kind of like what learning Spanish is. Juan Carlos says, hey, Aaron, watching you from Honduras at 9 a.m. Good to see you. Thanks, Juan. Thanks for commenting. Good to see you, too. Lucas says, I'm from Argentina, but I'm a native Spanish speaker and actually a bit fluent in English. I'm actually a bit fluent in English. I'm thinking and starting another language, but I don't know how to start. Well, you're at the right channel for the right discussions. He says he's fluent in English, right? And that's what we're talking about here. That's how we, we throw this word around, and it's not always clear that what one person means by fluent is what everyone else means. In fact, I was going to do this earlier and I forgot. I'm going to type in the definition of fluency. Fluency, according to Google, is the quality or condition of being fluent. No crap. The ability to speak or write a foreign language easily and accurately. The ability to express oneself articulately. Let's look up fluent in itself. Able to express oneself easily and articulately, able to speak or write a particular foreign language easily and accurately, of a foreign language spoken accurately and with facility or easily, right? Smoothly graceful and easy, able to flow freely, fluid. And you can kind of hear how the word fluent and fluid kind of go together. They sound very similar, right? And I think that's an important part of what fluency is. I hear a lot of people define the word fluency as in it somehow relates to what it's like to speak like a native speaker. Okay. So if you're fluent in German, then you speak German the same way someone from Germany would. And I think that's kind of a ridiculous definition of fluency. I speak 4 or 5 languages, and I speak one language truly like a native speaker, right? Now, I can have a long conversation in Spanish without really too many hiccups or, just here and there searching for a word. But I have an accent, okay? I don't sound like a native speaker when I speak Spanish. And realistically, if you started learning your target language after the age of 9 or 10, you'll never be able to speak that language perfectly like a native speaker. Okay, this is sort of a controversial thing to say in the language learning community. And every time I say it, someone comes on, well, no, I believe you can actually sound exactly like a native speaker. You can eliminate your accent or speak with a perfect accent in your target language. I actually just don't think it's possible. If you've started learning your language as an adult, you're just never going to get there. Melissa says, hi, Aaron. It's 8 a.m. in California, and I'm watching a little before I have to start teaching my classes. I've been trying to learn Spanish this year and have really enjoyed watching your channel. Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate that. Lucas Santos says, for me, some people can be native and don't be fluent in your language at all. If you don't have any social skills and don't know how to communicate yourself, are you really fluent? I don't think so. Well, that's an interesting definition of fluent as well. So Lucas kind of defines fluent as something along the lines of being able to have good social skills, being able to connect easily with other people while you're talking, easy communication. Saludos de España. Sag es auf Deutsch. Hola, saludos desde America. Hello from Brazil. Hello. Oi. And I don't define fluency as you are a sociable person or you're well able to communicate. All of the definitions that I just read you off of Google seem to have something to do with just being able to speak fluidly. Your language flows out without having to stop and think too much. And it doesn't have anything to do with your accent, right? So you can go your entire life with an accent but still be fluent. And you can and you don't have to stop and interrupt the flow of your conversation in order to look up words or ask the meaning of a word. That to me is being fluent, and there's different levels of it. Okay, B2 is a level of fluency, even maybe B1, depending on your conversation. Even though at these levels, you're clearly not able to discuss everything you would want to. You're not able to discuss politics and some more technical conversation subjects like that, politics, science, any kind of critical theory. But you don't have to in order to be fluent. You can have a fluent conversation about yourself, about things that you are constantly talking about, because these are the things that you most often discuss in your target language and you're used to it. You're confident. You've introduced yourself and you've described your job so many times in your target language that now you are just an expert in your target language at discussing those things. Okay. Whereas you maybe have never discussed politics or, rocket science. Bethania says, that's a good definition. I'm advanced in English, but I'm not 100% fluent because I often have to look up words. Yeah, and, I would say if you are, if you're able to hold most conversations with relative ease, without having to stop and ask people to repeat themselves too much, that's fluent in my book. And again, this is like one of those things. It goes back to last week when we had the conversation. What does it mean to speak a language? Right? Because I say I speak 5 languages, more or less. I for sure can speak 4 languages. He says, "Hi, Mister. What's your mother language?" My mother language is English. That's the only language I speak like a native speaker. Okay, but I also speak English, French, and Esperanto, and I can hold full conversations in those. I can more or less hold a basic conversation in Thai. I can't hold any real conversation in Greek other than just hello, how are you, fine, thanks, and you. But especially depending on especially in some of my more advanced languages, I for sure can hold entire conversations. I can go visit my friends in Colombia or in El Salvador, and I can go off on an excursion with them and not speak English for the entire day, just converse entirely in Spanish all day long, with groups of friends, and and I can participate in group conversations and stuff, without ever feeling left out of the conversation or without ever feeling strained, like I'm, and it does happen. It happens quite often. I forget a word. I have to use I mispronounce a word, something like that, right? I have to find some way of speaking around the word that I've forgotten. On occasion, my friends will use a word in conversation that I don't know, okay? Generally speaking, when that happens, I'm able to figure out what that word means just based off of context, right? If someone says, hey, do you want a cup of blah, 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 in my foreign language, but I see that they're offering me a cup of tea, then I don't have to guess, well, what's that blah, blah, blah word that they just said? Are they offering me a cup of wine? Are they offering me a cup of motor oil? I can see they're holding a cup of tea out to me so that I can just realize that blah, 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 whatever they just said is tea. Okay, so you use context to understand, even if you don't understand every word. And there's native speakers who are not quite as articulate and not sometimes socially awkward in conversation. But you don't say that they're not fluent. There's also, there's native speakers who don't know every word of the language. Okay, I would venture to say that probably every native speaker has words that they don't know in their own native language. It doesn't make them not fluent. All right, Lucas Santos, did you ever see the Ms. Holly channel? She's an American, but she really talks like a native Spanish speaker, and it's so impressive. Yes, I have seen her channel. I believe she actually grew up in Mexico, though. Is that correct? You can have more than one native language. And you can still consider something to be your native language, even if you started learning it at around the age of 4 or 5. I have a friend who they adopted a young boy from Brazil who spoke only Portuguese when they adopted him. But they brought him to America and then spoke English to him, and eventually he forgot Portuguese and now speaks English. only English. And so he's a native English speaker, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be the first language that you learn. Did you, okay. Hi, Aaron. Good morning from New Orleans. I'm Fingtem fluent in German. That's funny. Currently learning Dutch and giving up on Swedish, LOL. Learning several languages from the same family is like a fun word game. Yeah, I agree. When I first started learning French, I was already fluent in Spanish, and I would say about 50% of my ability to speak French for the first year or two came from studying French. The other 50% of my ability to speak French came from pronouncing Spanish words with a French accent, like francifying. Is that how you would say that? Francifying? Francicizing? I'm trying to come up with the word like anglicizing, except make it French. So I would francicize Spanish words, and it works more often than not. And also using Spanish grammar, right? Like I had already learned the difference between the preterite and the imperfect, which is more or less the difference between the passé composé and the imparfait. I learned how to do like relative clauses and things in French easier. It was easier to do possessives because rather than using apostrophe s like in English, they both use de or de. In French, I don't know, there's more similarities. You never put the preposition at the end of the sentence in French or in Spanish, so you have to construct them more or less the same. Whereas in English, your grammar teacher might have told you not to end the sentence with a preposition, but everyone knows it's a perfectly acceptable thing, right? Because you wouldn't say, "For what did you do that?" You'd say, "What'd you do that for?" Right? Or I don't know. There's plenty of instances in English where you end your sentence with a preposition, and it sounds just fine, as opposed to French and Spanish, where you can't say, okay, so let's translate. For what did you do that? ¿Para qué hiciste eso? Okay, instead of saying, what did you do that for? ¿Qué hiciste eso para? Makes no sense. It's terrible Spanish. Because in Spanish, you legitimately can't end your sentence with a preposition, as opposed to English, where they tell you not to do that, but you actually should end many of your sentences with a preposition. All right. Bethania says, yeah, that's important. You don't have to know every word, but you can hold a conversation based on context. Right. And especially if you spend a lot of time discussing one specific subject, you say, I'm a teacher, or I'm a mechanic, or I'm a lawyer. You're going to have conversations about work with people. And so you're going to start to learn all of the words that have to do with your job. Okay, the more conversations you had, the more fluent you will become on that specific topic. Okay, or with hobbies, right? I like to play the guitar, and I'm going to discuss guitar playing with people who play the guitar from Spanish-speaking countries. I like to play Magic the Gathering. I like hiking. I like traveling. Okay. I like language learning. I like Esperanto. These are all things that I'm going to discuss in my target language. And the more I discuss those things, the more I will become fluent discussing those things, because I learned the vocabulary, I learned the phrases that are related to those hobbies. I may never learn all of the vocabulary related to cooking, because that's not a hobby of mine. And I will rarely have conversations that revolve around cooking. I may have conversations that revolve around eating, because that's something that's near and dear to my heart. But cooking is not. So especially early on, you will eventually learn cooking words as you move closer and closer to a C2 level. but especially early on in your B levels, maybe early C1, you may not be able to, you probably don't know everything about every topic in your target language. And that's fine. Is your accent American or you speak an American accent? I would say both of them. I have an American accent. And wait, is your accent American or you speak an American accent? Yeah, I have an American accent. I'm from America, and that's another thing as well. Thanks for bringing up that topic. One of the things that doesn't seem to make sense to me is when someone says, "Well, I still have an accent, so I'm not fluent," or if they define fluent as you sound like a native speaker, you don't have an accent when you speak their language. Everyone who has ever spoken a language spoke that language with an accent. I'm speaking to you with an accent right now. Okay, I have a American accent, a Northern Cities accent, a Wisconsin accent. Okay, I don't speak English the same as someone from Texas or Dublin or South Africa or Australia. Okay, I speak English like someone from Wisconsin. And when I speak Spanish, I don't speak Spanish like someone from Spain or Costa Rica or Bolivia. Okay, I speak Spanish like me. But a native speaker of Spanish doesn't sound like everyone else. They all have an accent. Okay, when I speak French, it's not a Parisian accent or a Montreal accent. I just sound like me. So no matter, and like I said, if you are a native speaker of French, you're still speaking with an accent. It just happens to be your accent or the accent of the place that you're from. So will you ever fully get rid of your accent? In some regard, that sentence doesn't even make sense because no, of course you will never get rid of your accent. You'll just be speaking in the accent of whatever language you're trying to learn. Of course, what people mean is leaving behind the accent that is heavily influenced by your native language and start speaking with an accent that is closer to the accents of the language that you're learning, of the native speakers that you're learning, of the language you're learning. Which is also part of the reason why my Spanish accent is a bit of a mix. It's a mess. I started learning Spanish in El Salvador, but I had a lot of Spanish professors from Spain, and I spent several summers in Spain, or at least traveled there. I watched the Camino de Santiago, so I spent like over a month in Spain a few summers ago, and a big part of my accent in Spanish now is influenced by that. When I pronounce the word for heart in Spanish, sometimes I say corazón, sometimes I say corazón. It kind of comes out at random, and I can't entirely control it unless I'm slowing down and speaking very carefully. And I kind of like that because, I don't want to be boxed in to one accent. I'm not a native speaker, and I feel like if I were to learn the accent of just Mexico and try to shoot for that accent, I'll never actually reach that accent. Truly, I can get really good. I can get really close. But when you scratch the surface, I will never, you'll be able to tell that I'm not actually a native speaker, right? Even if I practice nonstop the Mexican accent for 20 years, it'll come out it'll come out that I'm not a native speaker when I'm tired or on occasion when I pronounce a word differently than a Mexican speaker, just because I really am not a native speaker. Sometimes mellophony will be off. so I'm not shooting for that. I'm not shooting for a specific accent. I kind of enjoy having a mixed bastard of an accent, right? A little bit European, a little bit Central American, a little bit South American, a little bit North American, right? And then if I ever go to, I don't know, Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic or something, maybe we'll throw in some, some Caribbean accent as well. So, yeah, so all that to say, don't stress yourself out too much about sounding like a native speaker, about what your accent is. We all have an accent. All right. My dad's first language was German. I'm reading from Bethania. My dad's first language was German, even though he was born in Brazil. He only learned Portuguese when he went to school around 5. Yeah, I heard that there's been some like big European immigration movements to like Brazil and Paraguay and like a lot of Mennonites and stuff like that. That's interesting. All right. If anyone else obsessed with watching videos on how to learn a language but actually don't speak, but doesn't spend as much time as they should on learning it. Oh, yeah. So you're asking. I do this and it sucks so bad. Yeah, that's a good point, Maria. That's actually an excellent point. I fell into this trap about 10 years ago. I decided I wanted to start studying photography. I was in the Marine Corps at the time, so I couldn't like necessarily just drop everything and start studying photography in school. So I did a lot of learning and reading and studying on my own. And, you find websites, photography for beginners. And then you would get like a book, photography tips and tricks, how to do lighting, how to do photo composition, all this stuff about how to be a better photographer, how to take better pictures. And I fell into the trap of doing so much reading about photography that I never actually, or I rarely actually went out and practiced doing the things that I was reading about. Okay, because it's so easy just to sit in front of the computer and then just lounge there for 2 hours reading about how to take better pictures, but you have to go out and practice it. The thing I always say is, you don't read a thesis on how to swim in order to swim. You go into the pool, all right? And you might start on the kiddie side, holding up on the side of the pool and kicking, right? Or kicking with a paddleboard, wearing floaty wings, practicing your strokes, okay? But you have to be in the water before you learn how to swim. A book won't do it for you. Same thing with language learning. It's great to like listen to people who have learned lots of languages and how they do it. It's great to just read books and listen to experts, but you have to practice your language. That's the number one thing. Practice your language, or you will not advance. All right. Chronologically, Cantonese is my first language. This is from Mitchell. Chronologically, Cantonese is my first language. My parents spoke it to me as a baby, but ever since I started going to school in English, I now consider English to be my native language. Yeah, that happens quite a bit. Do you consider the two terms to be different? Sorry, I'm not. Sometimes I'm so slow on reading the comments. I don't remember what you were like. I don't know what you were referring to when you asked that question. But as far as first language and native language. Technically speaking, your first language is the first language that you learn. And you can learn a second language as a child. But then I would still consider those two languages to be your native language. Okay, and also from like a technical perspective, a lot of times like SLA researchers, when they're talking about a language that you're learning, especially a language that you're learning as an adult, they'll just call it L2 or your second language. You might already speak 7 languages, the language that you're learning, and there's the language where they're studying your interlanguage. We still call it L2, or your second language. We don't bother differentiating between 4th language, 5th language, 6th language. All right. Okay, one says, we can say, hiciste eso para qué, however. Yeah, you can say, hiciste eso para qué, but not, ¿qué hiciste eso para? Juan, esas son 2 oraciones distintas. ¿Hiciste eso para qué? And then one says, sí, olvido la coma que puse por accidente. Okay, Linda says, it is to speak easily without difficulties. That's more or less the same definition of fluency that I would say. Easy is sort of a relative term, right? How easy does it need to be before you can speak without difficulties? I would not claim to be fluent in Thai, even though there's some phrases that I can say easily. There's some phrases I've just said so many times I can say it easily. But once it comes to the point where you stop having to stop the conversation constantly, can you repeat that, please? What did you say? I don't understand. Once it gets to the point where you're no longer having to do this, and you know good and well that everything that they just said to you made no sense, right? At that point, then you can start saying, I'm fluent, right? If you're able to participate in the conversation as well, right? It's partially listening and partially speaking. Lucas Santos, I can't differentiate the accents in English yet. For me, all Americans or English accents sound the same for me. It's really funny because I was talking to a Scottish guy the other day, and he was saying we were discussing the difference between Spanish and Mexican accents, or like Spanish, like European Spanish and Mexican Spanish accents. And I was like, yeah, it's at the beginning you probably won't notice the difference. It's like for me when I was a kid, as a native speaker of American English, I would listen to British people speak and Australians speak, and I couldn't tell a difference between their accents. I could tell that they both had accents, but I couldn't tell you like which one was British and which one was Australian. Now I probably could. But to this Scottish guy that I was talking to, he was like, yeah, it's funny because, to people in the UK, the Australian accent sounds so different to us. And it's funny when you don't grow up as a native speaker of an accent, you can't necessarily hear the differences between other accents that aren't your own. Bethania says, I love British accents, but I can't imitate it because I learned English through Americans. Just start watching Harry Potter. That's all there is to it. It's really funny how British people are often able to imitate American accents very well because they watch so much American TV. And I think it's embarrassing for us to try to do the same with British accents. Paulo says, thanks for your channel. I learned a lot with your videos and your methodology to practice other languages, but I have a question. ¿Por qué eres tan hermoso? Gracias. Yeah, thanks, Paulo. Maria T, what's your views on bi-directional translation on text? Translate from target to native and then back to target. Do you think it's a good method, or should a person read and listen a lot only? As far as learning a language, I try to only use the native language. I don't like translation when I'm learning. It does help make it easier early on. So I use Pimsleur and Duolingo at the very early stages, but I prefer to get out of that and start using Link, watching YouTube videos only in the target language, listening to podcasts only in the target language. I try to get to that point early on. Now, when I was taking college classes in French and in Spanish, and I needed, I'm turning in a paper and I want my paper to be pristine, I would definitely translate things. I would go to lingui.com. Sometimes I would use Google Translate. I'm not recommending you just take translations straight from Google Translate, but use it as a tool to help you see if what you're writing comes out more or less the same as what comes out in Google Translate or on Lingui. I would use a mixture of Lingui, context.reverso.net, wordreference.com, and Google Translate. I would use those all in conjunction because they all have sort of strengths and weaknesses, as well as highnative.com. Because when I'm writing a paper for a class in school, I want to make sure that it's actually working. And yes, in those cases, I would translate something. First, I would start writing something in my target language, then translate it back into English through all these different methods and see if it comes out meaning the same thing, and then translate it back again to see if it still comes out the same way. I would do it back and forth, yeah. Fluency to me means when you can express anything you want to say without thinking about it for a long time, and you can keep a conversation. You understand what's being back with no problem replying. What's being said back with no problem replying. Yeah, that's more or less what I think would be a good definition of fluent, okay? And like I said, it's not entirely clear when that starts and when that ends. It's like remember, it's like the gradient. When does it stop being yellow and start being green? Okay, we know there's people who are fluent in English, okay, and we know there's people who are not fluent in English. But at what point does the yellow stop and the green begin? Right? It's a gradient. You're never gonna wake up one morning, study your lesson, and then Duolingo sends you a notification. Congratulations, you are now fluent in Spanish. Okay, doesn't work like that. It's a process, and it's a gradual process. Lucas Santos says, "Why are books in English so hard to read? When I try to read one, I feel like it's in a totally different language." I would recommend Link, Lingq. That's been a big help to me and a lot of other people. And yeah, and so I always recommend Link if you're trying to read. When using flashcards for vocab, let me start that again. When using flashcards for vocab, is it better to see the foreign language first and then to remember the meaning? Or to see your native language first and then to answer with the foreign language? In my opinions, it's better to do both. So don't just do one or the other. If you can find an app or if you're using physical flashcards, do both. Okay? It's easier to look at the target language word and then guess your native language word equivalent. It's easier to do it that way. So if you're really struggling, maybe do it in that direction from target language. Look at the target language and then guess or remember your native language word. But I think it's more beneficial to do it the opposite way. Read your native language word and then try to remember the target language word, okay? That's going to help you recalling the target language word for when you're in a conversation and you need to recall the target language word. But again, do both. I don't recommend just one or the other. Do both. Maria T says, "Sorry for so many questions. Every polyglot says review is essential, but how often do you review vocabulary or a lesson to not forget new expressions you learn after 3-4 days or after a few lessons?" Depends what kind of lessons you're doing. I really like programs for language learning that incorporate review into themselves, which is why I'm such a big fan of Pimsleur. All right, you learn a word in lesson 1. You don't have to review lesson 1 to review that word again, because they're going to bring it back to you in lesson 2. All right, and then in lesson 3, and then in lesson 5, and then in lesson 8, and then in lesson 15, right? They're going to periodically cycle this word back in, so you study it again, as opposed to just having to learn the word in lesson 1 and then go back to lesson 1 to review the word. That's what you have to do if you're using Language Pod 101. You can use words like Anki, programs like Anki or Memrise, where they use spaced repetition to automatically cycle that word back to you again. And that's just a built-in feature of the program. When it's something like watching a TV show or reading a article or something, when I was learning French, I watched this series called Extra en Français, and I watched that first episode every day because I wanted to get so familiar with the characters and their lines and their intonation and how they recited their lines. I internalized all of that, and it was really helpful because I watched the episode so much. And there was like, I don't know, 10, 12 episodes in the series. So after I had basically memorized episode 1, I started watching episode 2 over and over and over. Bethania says, thank you for your videos. I've been getting into linguistics and you have helped a lot. Thanks. That's great to hear. I am in the process of currently working on the next installment of the Linguistics 101 video series. So stay tuned for that in the next week or so. James Alphonse says, what do you think about reading fantasy instead of classic literature in your target language? I think that's a great idea. I do it. I'm reading The Witcher in Spanish right now. I like to read, I read Jules Verne's, I guess that's more of a science fiction, in French, as well as The Little Prince, The Petit Prince, which is maybe like fantasy meets science fiction in some ways. Maria T says, I was so proud when I understood Extra in Spanish perfectly. What resources do you first go to when starting a new language? Yeah, Extra is a great series for learning French, Spanish, English, or German. If you happen to be learning those 4 languages and you're intermediate, Extra is a great TV series. My favorite resources for starting a new language are probably Pimsleur, Link, and Duolingo, and HelloTalk. John says, hi, do you know a free app or webpage to practice speaking? Thanks. HelloTalk. HelloTalk is a great resource. I don't get anything from promoting them. I just believe in them. They hook you up with someone who speaks your target language as their native language, and they're learning your native language as their target language. And then you find people to practice with, you message each other, you do voice recordings, you schedule a Skype session. It's great. It's lots of speaking back practice for free. And I think I'm going to end it here because I have a Spanish lesson coming up in just a few minutes here. So thanks to everyone who watched this live stream and for those who participated and asked questions. Like I always say, that's what these live streams are for. If I wanted to just monologue, I would just record a video of myself talking. But these live streams are so I can have discussions with you guys. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.